Hey, what's going on? This is Coach Marcus Pro Fan Talk. We got to talk about the elephant in the room. Listen, the refs have got to get better. Watching that Bengals Chiefs game, that was horrible. You can't have that many missed calls. You're going to miss calls in every game. Our game was no different. The Eagles game was no different. But here's the problem. In this day and age, in this era, everything is video, high resolution, 4K, 8K. You got drone footage. You got cameras on pulleys that are above the field live when it's going on. You got kickers kicking the ball and the ball hitting the wire and disrupting the flow of the ball. You got punters down in Dallas kicking the ball so high it hits the scoreboard and you got to redo stuff. You got so many cameras on the field and you still are letting human error ruin these games. Now, take the last play of the Cincinnati Kansas City game out of the picture. What that kid did was wrong. He just lost all sense of his spatial awareness and got that penalty pushing Patrick Mahomes when he was clearly out of bounds. The kid just lost his shit and forgot where he was. Seen it happen before. Felt bad for the kid because for all intent and purposes, he cost his team an opportunity. You know, they got to kick that ball 15, 20 yards back. You never know what's going to happen. But that's not the play. It was the plays before. The 3 third downs, the phantom no play redo, just stuff that is the roughing the passer. Not roughing the passer, but intentional grounding. Sometimes you call it, sometimes you don't. Roughing the passer is another one. Sometimes you call it, sometimes you don't. I look at that as the Brady rules. Some of the shots that Joe Burrow was taking, if it had been Patrick Mahomes, it is my opinion that flags would have been thrown. That's all I'm going to say. In the Eagles game, the catch with Devontae Smith, but that wasn't necessarily a missed call. As it was Shanahan just not throwing the flag. Yes, there was a little bit of home cooking, and I would expect that at any home stadium. If you're unsure of a play and it's your team that made the play, you're not going to show the replay. But that's what New York is for. If you can have Gene Sarator on the broadcast telling you which calls were good calls, which calls maybe not so much, if you can have that on the broadcast, then you can have somebody looking at a play but you know, and you know, if you haven't seen my video on the law of averages, check that out. Because just like the Eagles have been on the wrong end of calls all year. And every team's like that for the most part. But we've had some egregious missed calls. The Dallas Goedert call being the worst one. Because he got the face mask that they just blatantly missed. We fumbled the ball, and we ended up losing that game in Washington because of that. So, the law of averages says that all of those bad calls you get, you're going to get some the other way as well. It just happens that way. But when you have these calls that are game-changing, that's the problem. Game-changing calls. And they're questionable. Why would you call that? I'm watching it, and there's a couple of calls where it was clearly Kansas City was holding. Defense was trying to get through to Patrick Mahomes, and it was blatant holding, no calls. And then they get 3 opportunities to get a third and 9 or whatever it was. Cincinnati stops them two of those 3 times, and on the third time, they get a penalty. And it's like, come on, man. And that's why people continue to say some of the stuff that goes on in the NFL is rigged. And the NFL is never going to get off of that. And it's not going to change until you're in a Super Bowl type situation and too much money changes hands for the worse. When Vegas gets involved, that's when they'll do the change. They already have the technology. They could have been done it. You can put a referee in the booth, and his only job is to, click down when you want to make sure a call is correct or something like that. That can happen. They can do that now if they want. They technically do that with all of this stuff and the people in the booth and the people they got talked to in New York, and it's too many ways to handle that situation. I think that's going to end up being like something's going to happen and be collectively bargained because they're making too many mistakes and it's costing teams money and opportunity. So we'll see what's happening. I hope that going into the Super Bowl, it's not going to be game-changing bad calls. If you're going to let them play, let them play. But be consistent with it. If you calling holding calls, if you calling it tight, call it tight through the whole game. Be consistent with it. If you calling roughing the passer on just a little tap, because now, in my opinion, some of these quarterbacks be flopping. You get a little tap from a defensive tackle or something like that, and then all of a sudden everybody's flopping on the floor like you just had somebody knock you out. And it's crazy. So whatever they're going to do, however they're going to call a game, just be consistent with it. That's the only thing. Just don't make it. It seemed like in the big scheme of things, it's not. But when the optics of it are, you got some questionable calls too many times in a championship game, that's bad for business. And it's unfair. Because when they're complaining about calls, that means they are not consistent. And Cincinnati had every right to be pissed off about how that game was officiated. So hopefully, whatever they're going to do in the Super Bowl, they will be consistent and everything will be fair. But we shall see. All right? Holla at you next time. Please subscribe to the channel. More content to come soon. Go Birds.